you have agreement across all of the leadership teams, right? All the different silos, and saying that they're going to help assist with this particular portion of the customer's journey. That is when the journey starts. From a B2B perspective, the journey could start at various areas, right? It could start when they're looking on, let's say, on our Azure portal, they're looking up a specific service, they're looking up something, just from a research perspective, even before they click and purchase something. Those lines now have customer success early on involved. We call it leaning left. They're involved in the entire process so that they're aware of things before they happen. It's just going to get us to use our brains to become more strategic. It's going to get us to use our brains to then enhance what we're doing from a customer success perspective, right? And then utilizing AI to not just be a journey coach expert, but taking it to the...
Hi, my name is Jochem van der Veer. I'm the CEO and co-founder of a company called TheyDo, the journey management platform for business decision making. We raised over $50 million and are growing globally. Our enterprise customers include Ford, J&J, the Home Depot, and Pfizer. I mean, wherever you look, understanding customers is key to staying ahead. But in order to do this at scale, aligning so many different teams with the customer journey is incredibly hard, but it is possible. I really wish this podcast existed before we started our company because so many companies are organizing around journeys and there's so much to learn. So in order to share what I'm learning, what I'm hearing with our community, I meet with industry experts. And in my video podcast, I'm here to explore the world of business strategy, design, and journeys, customer journeys, to really get an understanding of how leaders are changing their way in their business. So let's dive into the show. So my guest today is Raymond Otero, and he's the director of global customer experience at Microsoft, leading strategic programs for almost 3 decades, not just at Microsoft, but throughout his career. He focuses on making journey-based transformation possible, embedding detailed customer journeys into operational models. And that sounds cryptic, but there's a real method behind it, and we'll dig into the world of journeys, customer success, and how AI is reshaping the account relationship and the work that goes into delivering that experience. So beyond his role at Microsoft, he also contributes as an advisory board member at Influence Board and is a global ambassador for the Customer Success Collective. So the reason this is interesting to me is that I'm seeing more and more customer experience and customer success teams almost blend. And Ray sits in both or across both. Let's see how he takes it. So lots to dig in today. Ray, it's exciting to have you on.
Likewise. Thank you for having me, Jochem. I appreciate it. And I hope I pronounced your name okay.
Oh, you did really well. Like I'm not seeing that very often, like at the first line, especially not people living on the other side of the pond. So thank you for that.
Good.
When we were chatting before starting recording, like we talked about the evolution of the role, right? Customer success is changing quickly, but you actually sit in the customer experience organization at Microsoft. So I'm really curious to hear like your definition of it, if you even have one, or maybe even that's changing, and then also understand like when you say like it's changing quickly, like what exactly is changing? Because like I said, it's blending to what I'm seeing, but like I'm really curious to get your take and to hear like where in the organization do you sit?
Yeah, no, that's perfect. Thank you for the segue, Jochem. And I gotta say, coming into the role I'm in now, just to set the stage, I've been in the field for most of my career in various industries and verticals, right? Now, having been in customer success, as that started becoming a role and started becoming a thing, even since the Citrix days where I worked, there was a program that was called Customer for Life, and since then there were a lot of evolutions and pivots and things of that nature as far as what the role entails. So fast forward into Microsoft, I started in the field. I, worked on very strategic accounts, very heavy accounts, very involved accounts, and I needed it to be able to do everything, kind of like the COO of the account, and worked across the plethora of them. Moving into the role that I'm in now, in our global customer experience group, which is getting a lot more visibility out there in the workspaces and where we're, penetrating, is taking that field perspective into more of the journey holistically, right? So if I were to say how the role has evolved, I would say if we look at it from a doctor perspective. You have those doctors that are very holistic. They have doctors that focus on everything and anything. And you have ones that are specialists that focus on specific areas in the process, right? For the journey and where I'm at, we focus on, we came from specific areas. And now what we all did was combine with all of our expertise and talents into one, which then provided for even more of that kind of like segue across the journey from the initial conversation with the customer all the way to the last portion of the conversation and ongoing. What I do now is take that whole level of customer success to the next level and make it more holistic and make it so that not just the customer is enabled, but also our field teams and everybody internally are part of that process and make it more cohesive, right? So that way they have a better experience, which in turn helps the customer have a better experience, if you know what I mean. So I would say that actually showed me a very distinguishing kind of gap, and I've seen in other organizations outside of where I'm at now, as far as okay, CX focuses on surveys and contact centers and all of those things, right? No, it's actually for us, it's much more than that.
So what is more than that? And maybe like what we could do, and this could be fun. Like if we think about a holistic perspective, the end-to-end experience, the end-to-end journey, like people often think like CX is at the far end of it, right? In the service experience, like in a contact center. So that's not true. But you could say the same for customer success, right? It's like a post-sales organization. It's like we chuck over the deal over the fence and they will figure it out with the customer. But that's also not true. So let's start maybe there. It's like customer success and customer experience are separate functions in many organizations. So what's wrong about that?
I would say because of that gap, and people thinking that we're separate in the organization, it really doesn't give it chance to evolve, and until leadership really defines that success as far as the journey health is concerned, you're always going to see those silos. So I say journey health because not just us, but a lot of groups in general are really focusing on journey and customer health. But when CX comes into play, right? They usually are thought of as an afterthought when something is about to happen. But what's going on is that there's that coordination gap between CX and customer success that really doesn't actually improve the experience of the customer, and then the adoption rates are going to go down. They're just looking at numbers. They're just looking at specific data points, and they don't. There's not really that true value of delivery. Whereas if leadership defines those terms and then provides that cohesion and that support at the executive level, which is what happened here, for example, we now have this plethora of opportunities that we can work across from beginning to end, and then provide all of those different facets of the business even more easily to our field teams to then give them that experience. And then the customer, not only will they feel heard, but now that whole voice of the customer concept is becoming more of a thing. It's more of a, instead of a survey coming in that just goes into a black hole or something like that. We always, even in smaller companies, like I work with, mid market and SMB, for example, having talked with some of those leaders, they'll send out surveys across every piece of their application or whatever it is, just to understand what it is. And the voices are heard more so in some of those types of companies, but with companies like that are much bigger, they don't tend to have that high touch, that sense of partnership, that sense of co-creation, right? So when I talk about CX and CS, I'm talking about that focus of co-creation, that focus of not just customer success. Okay, they're going to deal with it because the sales guy just closed the deal. Now post-sales deals with it. No, those lines are blurred for us. Those lines now have customer success early on involved. We call it leaning left. They're involved in the entire process so that they're aware of things before they happen, right? Now the CX team comes in, and we are involved, like my portion in strategic programs, for example, we are involved in helping specific aspects of the journey so that the field is better equipped with handling things more proactively. Because again, if those areas are siloed, then the experience is just never going to be there. Hence, CX is not going to become a thing.
All right. So what you're actually describing is like the larger the company, the more chances there are that CX is a tiny department that is doing
Correct.
surveys and
Correct.
analyzing that, checking the reports.
Mm-hmm.
But in smaller companies, it's actually more holistic. But what you're saying is like by definition, it should be aligned with the journey, and that's leaning left. Okay, so let's follow the thread. So if we take it more to the left, right? Let's follow the journey. Like CS, customer success, is typically seen as like in the post-sales organization. You're saying like leaning left to bring them closer to it. So what are you doing differently to reshape this to make sure that that actually happens? Like, where does journey come in? Maybe that's a better way to ask this question, because we all talk about the journey. Marketing thinks it's a funnel, sales thinks it's the pipeline, CX thinks it's an actual journey map. Like, everyone has a different opinion about what the journey is. So maybe we should unpack that first. Like, in your mind, like, what is journey, and how do we actually like see the post sales org lean left in that?
Yeah, so I'd say journey, like there's two aspects of it. If we're talking journey for a consumer, right? So if it's a business to consumer B2C, for example, the very first instance they click on something on your app, on your web app, or on your website, that's the journey starts. The minute they click something, done. They're intrigued. There's something that they're doing. They got visibility into your product. That is when the journey starts. From a B2B perspective, the journey could start at various areas, right? It could start when they're looking on, let's say, on our Azure portal, they're looking up a specific service, they're looking up something, just from a research perspective, even before they click and purchase something. Then we need to be aware of those things. Now, if I'm talking about something like a formal account engagement, like let's take it a step forward. Let's talk about, the salesperson, the AE as we call it. Let's talk about the AE gets involved. They're on an account. They're working on, or various accounts, depending on what size and shape they are. They have a direct in with a lot of different folks on that account, right? Or they may have transitioned from another account executive or whatever it is, or it's net new. That journey starts the minute that they open, the minute that there's a specific opportunity that happens. That's where the journey starts for the field teams to then get engaged. When I'm talking about CS, so customer success, when that opportunity comes in, it's all about that whole overarching kind of like engagement methodology, or whatever you want to call it, right? You have CRM, everybody has that, right? And there's all kinds of tooling and whatnot that gets integrated into it, right? Salesforce, whatever it is. You have that aspect of what gets inputted into CRM. Now, the minute something gets inputted, now it's the customer success folks in our side of it get directly involved early on, so that they know and they're a fly on the wall. They hear what's going on, what's coming down the pike, so that they can plan accordingly. That then causes a trigger effect. Now, as far as that journey and what it means, is there's a lot of meat in the middle. That journey then has more components that the CS teams can then get involved with, like i.e. customer success planning, i.e. Certain proactive analyses that they could be doing for the customer even before the deal is done. So that way they can see, and that's where the blurred lines come in. They can see now with the CX teams and CS teams how well we're working together, because now they're leveraging our data points and our data sets and all the goodness that we have in our dashboards. And they're now, as a business, better able to understand what the customer's about before they even close the deal. So that journey gets very meaty the minute that they input something into our CRM platform. That's where everything should start. And that's where that lean left really, really, really kicks in.
So where do you, and this is fascinating, right? You have the other part of the customer experience field, the experience design, service design, user experience, the product groups that are also thinking about this end-to-end experience for the customer, right? And it sounds like what you're describing specifically, like when we have an opportunity, when we're working with a prospect, turning it into a customer, making them successful, right? That part of the journey is what you're describing. So, and then we have the CX team that are typically like with one leg in both of these organizations. How do you see this blend? Like, how do you see this roll out? Is that also something that's blending into the customer experience organization in your mind?
Yeah, it is. It is, and it definitely is. And I see it blending in multiple ways. There's, you have different let's say on the CX side, we gather data. We have focus on analytics. We focus like every other org. We focus on analytics. We focus on the insights of it. We focus on the engagement with the field, right? Because there's different facets of customer experience. If you were to set up that org, optimally, you then have those different groups that are helping with drive that customer experience across the board, right? For that customer, right? Or for that particular segment or that region. How it blends is with our level of engagement with the field, meaning we, us and other groups for that matter, are starting to get involved with the different business area leaders and all of those folks to kind of understand what their rhythms of business are and how do we mesh with those rhythms of business so that we can provide our insights and our data points to then better better equip them with doing their work streams, right? To build out their revenue, their portfolio of business, their book of business, whatever you want to call it. That is the area where we're seeing a lot of that blending in, right? Where there's a lot of journey aspects that are happening, but the minute we get responses and the minute we get certain things from a CX perspective, that then gets delivered back to the business leaders, and then they can understand what's going on with regards to that business and whatever have you. So that's something I see in other organizations as well. That's starting to happen. It's becoming more prevalent in even bigger organizations. Is they're developing more of a cohesive rhythm of business or operating rhythm across the organizations, so that way those folks understand what we're about and what that journey is supposed to look like. And now, product groups, for example, are also getting brought into that, right? Product groups are, there's ours is huge, but I mean, if we talk about smaller firms and SMB and mid-market firms, like I've interfaced with a lot in the past, for example, they're even more directly involved now. As things progress, it's the same thing with any enterprise company. That tends to get a little bit more siloed, and they start doing their own thing, and then that's where we want to change things, and that's where in my mind, right, my opinion, that needs to be adjusted and course corrected across the board for all the different shapes and sizes of the organizations, right? Because the product group needs to be part of that from the beginning as well, so that they can appropriately validate how their design is going to look like and how their product's going to evolve, right?
Are you saying that the journey is the glue that ties everything together?
Yes.
Is that what you're saying? Then everyone can look at it from the same thing that we at least all agree on? Is that what you're navigating towards?
Developing that methodology, understanding the methodology of, working backwards from the customer, right? And, that's a working backwards concept, which is I really, really enjoyed that. And I took that from a prior place that I worked. Really, that aspect of customer obsession really holds true, and everybody uses it in different ways, right? That terminology of customer obsession. But if you were to peel that onion back a little bit and understand the journey more so, and then roll that into a specific methodology with rhythms of business and development opportunities and things like, for instance, I do strategic programs as far as, ways for us to do things more quickly for the customer and be more proactive about things, then that ties very nicely into that journey. And then the engagement methodology follows suit. So once every leader within an organization agrees on that methodology, has that alignment, then you can use that as a foundation to then build out all the goodness that you need to build out so that you can help improve a customer's experience.
Can we geek out a little bit on how this actually works in practice? Because what I'm seeing organizations do well is one side of this, not necessarily two sides. Let me first explain the sides that I'm seeing, and then curious to get your take on it. And I hope you can shine a light on how to actually do it together. So the first part is the tactical. It's okay, in a customer, even if we would take the journey, for a particular B2B customer, we understand where in the journey they are, what are the touch points we're having, what are we doing? That can be managed even with a CRM or with your dashboards. But then when we look at a particular segment or a market, then it gets a little bit more complicated, because then you need to roll up all that data and understand where in the experience things are broken. But typically that's manageable, and what organizations do is they take those frictions or the opportunities where we can do faster or better, and they bring that to the field. Okay, they give their reps, their agents, the AEs, the SDRs, the BDRs, whoever they work with or how they name them, they give them the tools to do so. So very tactical, like here's a little thing, here's a little thing for that customer, this customer. Then we have what you call on your strategic side, on the program side, here's the bigger opportunities that we're seeing. Here's an underserved market. Here's a big strategic opportunity. Or if we do want to make a better or faster service, like we need to get these 5 teams to align. There's a strategic opportunity for us, and that needs budget and planning and a couple of cycles to go through. So I'm seeing organizations either be really good at strategic part or be really good at the tactical part. But it sounds like you found a way to do both. Is that a fair assessment?
Yeah, even before, correct, and even before where I'm at currently, it came to fruition for me when I was building out at one point in my life, building out a kind of like a practice from scratch, right? When you're building out a practice that involves all different types of folks, involves pre-sales, marketing, involves all the different teams, sales, and then you have to enable each one of them, transform them, and create something so they can become cohesive. Make it like a small P&L within a company, right? So it all started there for me, where in my mind, even before Microsoft, just thinking about how we're doing things from a relationship perspective, that methodology, that joint operating model kind of a concept was really, really crucial for me, where we would then map out specifics. So this is how we're going to get to do this, right? Just going right into it. You create different aspects of what that journey looks like. Let's say there's, call them each, milestones of a customer or whatever the case is. Say we have, and you input something into CRM, you have an opportunity, right? This is an example. And that opportunity now involves certain groups within the business that need to have, either conversations or whatever it is. You can call that a specific milestone. Then you take it to the next step. There's multiple stages and phases in those milestones. Then the next step would be, okay, I'm going to get involved in stage 2, meaning now we have an established cadence with the customer. Now we know what they want. Now we need to understand a little bit more around XYZ, right? Just an example. That's another stage. And then you have specific groups within your business integrate into those different stages, right? That's like, it's a joint operating model, essentially what it is, where you have agreement across all of the leadership teams, right? All the different silos, and saying that they're going to help assist with this particular portion of the customer's journey, and they're going to be involved, right? But we don't want to boil the ocean. We don't want to get like, that's a problem with a lot of different organizations. They tend to, come with an army, and then there's only 2 people in the customer side that's attending a meeting, right? So we have 30 people from our side and then 2 people over there. That doesn't look right. So we want to, you want to balance it out. You want to balance what that looks like, right? And have those key stakeholders involved along the way for everything and anything, right? To make sure that that's a very, very, cohesive, very, smooth process, not involving so many people coming in, right? That's where it gets insane, right? But that methodology, that aspect of having a joint model doesn't just stop there, though. It actually also includes the customer, depending on how big the customer is, right? How much you want to focus on it. You could make it big or small. But what I found to work very well is having that model, internally, but also now the customer, you're bringing them along and having this co-creation tactic. There's this model where you could then go to a customer, like I've met with customers in the past, and I said, hey, Mr. or Mrs. or person CTO or whatever, we have this model. I want to share this with you. I put it in the branding of their logo. Say, here, this is yours. What is this? I don't know what this, this is great, but what is this? This is us working backwards from you. This is us working with you, and now we see all of these different areas that you're working on with us as a company. But now I want to peel that onion back, and I want to be your partner. And I want to be able to include you in that co-creation and digital transformation journey. So that way it's not just transactional. So that way you're paying for a service, yes, and that part is the transactional piece, but I don't even bring that up. And I don't even bring up anything about product in these conversations with the customer because it shouldn't matter. I'm bringing up that business value add of what they're trying to do with our products without even mentioning a name of one, right? And I'd say to them in this hierarchy, this operating model, and we would say to them, you want to focus on customer 360 for your base, right? Customer A. Great. So that's an area in our joint operating model that we're going to have. And by the way, I'm going to assign specific people to those areas that are accountable and responsible for anything and everything customer 360. So there's going to be a specialist involved. There's going to be whatever it is. Same with, it's not a stakeholder mapping, by the way. It's like a completely like holistic approach to making the customer work with you and making it so that they feel that you're like on their team and we're not just.
Is that literally like an end-to-end journey working backwards from the outcome and then saying like, here is it?
Exactly.
That's how it looks?
Exactly. So any outcome, it could be anything, like any outcome. It could be with specific use cases. It could be like, I had a recent, like a customer a few years back that we talked about, they wanted to do things with IoT. They wanted to do things with all this services. In my last role that I had before coming to Microsoft, we had similar concepts, right? And we would create my methodology is creating those use cases and putting them together in a very simple illustration, showing who's accountable and responsible, putting pen to paper, and then within each of those buckets, having a specific rhythm of business that then focuses on that. And then you bring it up, and then you have folks that are more senior on different accounts and different portions of the organization that then are involved in certain steercos and different things with the customer so that they can feel that they're part of something and they're part of that journey, right? You're not just creating a customer journey map for them and then you're just bringing it internally. You're actually doing it with them and then having them along the way, right? Saying, hey, you're going to focus on this extra, component with us. We're going to then show you the true business value, but I'm not even bringing up anything about the product until it gets implemented. Nothing. I'm just saying, like if it's a smaller company, let's say any company, Zen, the Gainsight, whatever company it is, they have specific product sets. You could have that product set be the end all be all, not even bring it up at all. Just talk about what their use cases are and just sit there and listen. Have like an envisioning session with them. That's the first step to that building out that joint operating model. That just envisioning everything, putting pen to paper, but then you as the business puts together the content, then brings them in your first steerco, and then say to them, this is what I had in mind. What are your thoughts? Then just stay quiet and let them do their piece.
I love that. How does that go into the inner workings of the company? So this is what you do with the customer, and you're assigning the different people, and you make sure they're unblocked, they're making progress, they're hitting their milestones, getting the use case implemented, seeing the value from it. So then there's friction, there are blockers, there are things that don't work, there are unexpected surprises, right? Even if the pre and the post sales organization are very much aligned. So there's always these opportunities. So how do you bring that from that one client, customer, back to the organization, rolling it up to similar customers in that segment or what they're doing in that industry? So how does that translate into prioritizing with your internal stakeholders, be it on product, be it on operations, like wherever you want to take it? Like what would be an example of how you do that?
Yeah, no, that's great. And, there's a few examples, but one thing that comes to mind obviously is with any organization has a product group, any organization has developing teams, any organization has product managers or something along those lines, right? And more often than not, you have this different, pieces of the engagement that, there's always going to be a friction, there's a risk or a blocker that just pops up out of nowhere. Even if you can't find it in the data, even if if you're as proactive as possible and have all of your predictive analytics in place, which that's an area of also that point of contention that needs improving in various organizations across the globe, predictive analytics, especially with AI coming into play. That's a whole separate topic. But if we're talking about getting the right people involved from a friction standpoint and a risk and a blocker standpoint, that is where an operating model like this gets instantiated, and that's where one of the areas that shows the fruits of its labor, right? You can get, like, if you have all of those aligned stakeholders and you have those folks that are accountable and responsible, there are different aspects that you could weave into these phases that I was talking about as far as that operating model is concerned with the customer. If they have a product issue, whatever it is, they can roll that up to whoever's accountable for that portion or that portion of their bucket. then all the folks in the product group and developing teams, they can then get involved. You bring that back into the rhythm of business to your wherever you're working, and then have those conversations and prioritize them. Usually we have, not just here but everywhere in general, they have some sort of a, there's a hopper of sorts. There's a, an intake that you can then tie back to whatever that opportunity is, what that priority is, how much is that opportunity, what is that business value, what is that signal, that we need to understand, and why should we focus on this more quickly than something else that's going on in the rest of our account base. There's also the aspect of trend. There's also things that you can weave into it. There's a whole aspect of that whole intake process that would be part of this operating model that you could then implement.
So let's go to the AI piece, right? Because it definitely is changing everything. But I want to be specific on like where I think it's more interesting to see what exactly is happening. So one thing is escalating these parts of the journey from one customer relationship and making sure it lands in the right person's lab. More interestingly is like today we're relying on the post-sales team, the customer success team, the customer experience team to help find these, or even in the sales and enablement journey, right? Pre-sales team, the A's, everyone is working to find them, escalate them, and get that unblocked. But if you zoom out a couple of levels, then it might be a completely different game where you're seeing like, we're not going to invest in this area, even though customers are asking for it. Like there's a bigger opportunity or there's different friction. So clearly AI plays a big role in that, to bring all of that data together, to unify it, to create those signals, to really help you drive this. But there's so much more to this on how it enables the teams, augments the teams, and ultimately is replacing roles entirely. So talk to me a little bit about where you're coming from when you think about the role AI is reshaping basically a journey-based approach to customer success.
It is, yeah, that's a good question, and this can go many ways. But I think the way AI is reshaping things from my perspective is that it is going to help us not just figure out ways to get rid of simplifying those mundane tasks and things that we have to do every day within any account that we work on. It also is there, and if it's done right, can help bring those signals together and make that kind of like a machine learning model to help understand what's going on. As you're working with a customer, you could essentially have an ethical version of AI and things of that nature, all the guardrails, all that stuff in place. And you could essentially have that and have it analyze all the data and everything coming into your platforms and figure out certain things and provide it certain models and do a lot of that machine learning goodness to then get you to a positive outcome more quickly. Meaning, I view it as there's 5 buckets to this, like the stages of adoption, right? There's the cultural aspect of it, where that's that operating model. You're changing a culture of a customer, right? You're not just changing a culture of a customer, you're working on it internally too, right? But a lot of them, they feel that there's more cohesion there. The culture also means education, strategy, building it out, helping them understand what your product set's about, right? Doing that more proactively. So there's the culture aspect of it. Then you also have the aspect of it, which is everybody wants to veer from it, cost. The cost aspect of the business, right? What's the cost look like, and how are we going to help them improve their cost on our stuff, right? What are we doing around that? There's signals around that too. There's also aspects of it around the journey that relate to, like, again, from a CX perspective, all the surveys and all the goodness that we provide, the data, the insights that come from that, the, verbatims and all of those things, like analytics behind that. And how does that piece together? But you know what? A lot of what happens in those areas also tends to be siloed in various organizations that I've talked to over the last several years, even now, where you have one aspect of it that's just there. You have another aspect of what they're utilizing your product for. That's in one area. You have cost. You have all that stuff that the sales folks care about, that they're invoicing and they're doing things. That's in the third area. Then you have the fourth area, which actually comes into play, which is enablement, education, and building out the customer, right? That's all aspects of what customer success should be getting involved in and helping them get enabled too, right? That's another arm of it. But they're not all necessarily talking together. So using AI to help understand what those aspects look like and building out like different models, saying, what's the threshold of, okay, this customer is educated, they've done X amount of training. How does that correlate to cost? How does that correlate to utilization? How does that mesh with what the surveys are coming back with, right? All of those things AI could be doing at the same time as us just doing our day job. And then we could be involved with that process too, so it's not really taking away from what we're trying to do. It's making it so that our roles as customer success leaders and experienced leaders out there are more enabled to do more with less. Right? There's a heavy investment in AI. There's no secret. People like our company, every company is spending billions and billions of dollars and investing into this thing. But we have to know how to use it. We need to know how to use it to make it so that our field teams are better enabled with it, so that they can become innovators and so that they can do, like we talked about, leaning left. Now the roles are going to be changing. Even I feel, this is my opinion, that customer success managers and whatever we call them in whatever organization I worked with, we call them CSAM, whatever it is, that role is going to be blurred line with sales and all of those things where they're starting. We need to help create opportunities too. We need to show business value. So AI is going to help with that even more, right? As we're going through the journey. And I think that AI, when done right, can help bolster what we're doing out there in the field and show the value that we have more quickly so that we can become even more proactive than we already are.
If you're enjoying this conversation, don't forget to subscribe on your favorite podcast channel and leave a review. It makes all the difference. The Experience Edge podcast is where I interview business leaders, CX pioneers, and the best designers who share their insight on creating business impact, having an edge on the customer experience. Do you want more exclusive content and behind-the-scenes access? Check out the Experience Edge podcast on YouTube and LinkedIn so you don't miss a thing. Now let's get back to the conversation. Do you think AI is fundamentally coming after customer success as we know it? I mean, like for the enterprise complicated, complex stakeholder landscape, obviously customer success people are very necessary today. But on the other end of the spectrum, like low touch environments, and on the consumer side, like there's or like consumerization of B2B software, like one person in success holds like hundreds of accounts, and ultimately AI will come for their jobs entirely. Do you believe that that will happen?
Honestly, being a pragmatist and being a realist about it, there's certain aspects of what is being done that, yeah, it could take away from, certain roles. But if done right, though, the roles can evolve. It's that whole concept of, we thought that back in the day during the Industrial Revolution, we didn't have cars. And then all of a sudden they invented cars and all these things started happening. And then the people that were selling the horse and buggy rides, they were like, well, we're going to be out of a job. We don't know what to do. We don't know how we're going to do it. We're transporting people in our horse and buggy. We don't have this. Now the car came about. Now look what's happening. The same concept. AI came about. Look what's happening. Now we just need to evolve with that. And that's where I say the roles are going to get blurred and then the roles are going to evolve. We're going to become more like, and I use this terminology even a few years back, for me, for instance, we're having worked at some of the biggest service providers in the world, being a cloud journey coach is very, very pertinent to this conversation. I'm a coach. You could have AI and chatbots they can act like they have feelings, and you have all these things, and you have people implementing things in CRM to help with certain aspects of the business where we don't need to be as low touch as far as, going in and doing the tactical stuff. That aspect of it, I feel, is going to eventually, get, removed. There's not going to be, we don't need to do as much of the tactical things. It's just going to get us to use our brains to become more strategic. It's going to get us to use our brains to then enhance what we're doing from a customer success perspective, right? And then utilizing AI to not just be a journey coach expert, but taking it to the customer and showing them, hey, this is something that I noticed that maybe the customer didn't even notice, that they didn't even notice in their own environment. And then they can say, oh, wow, this is value. And that's something that otherwise a customer success person, a CSM is involved on an account, they couldn't have done otherwise because there's so much involved tactically. Like I was in it, like all these escalations, all these things, and it gets insane. Like there's too much going on. But how am I going to focus on those strategic areas? I don't have time in the day, and I'm getting involved in escalation calls and with people, incident management, and all these things. That part we shouldn't be involved with anymore, and that's going to change fundamentally across the board. And companies, all organizations that I've talked to are working to change that and alter that, right? But that's where the AI piece comes in and helps with those aspects of the tactical things and helps us evolve from the horse and buggy to the car to the flying car to the eventually we're going to start floating out there in the universe. I don't know what's going on over there, but we're not, you know, that's so, you know, we evolve as human beings, and that's just the way it is time and time again over the last, what, several thousand years of, you know, what we've done.
It's so fascinating when you think about this, right? I mean, I love the notion of a coach because it's exactly the same as we're building our teams. It's like all the grunt work, even like answering the question, like which button should I press to achieve XYZ? It's like that's still a question that customer success teams get every day from their customers. And you would argue like that's not their role. But when we're talking to you anyway, like, yes, let me help you because, you know, I'm all about your success. But in reality, if we are in customer success, if we're in customer experience and we understand this, it would be quite challenging to look at like, what am I actually spending my time on every day? Like chances are like a couple of hours are like actually helping the customer do these things. And at the same time, we're saying like, we don't want AI to replace our jobs, but actually this part we would gladly hand over to AI. While customers are maturing using Copilot, using GPT, whatever the solution is, they're chatting constantly with technology to get their answer. So those questions could be answered with AI. So it's so fascinating to see because at the same time, we want to have that coach. And what I don't think, I mean, right now where the models are, like you don't get a coach out of the box, even though there are some solutions out there that say like, that's fantastic. That's what we offer. Like it's not there, let's face it. So we need to talk to Ray or someone from his team to really understand like how do I get the value from what I bought or what I'm trying to achieve.
Yep.
That's the conversation we should be having. But instead we're answering like, oh, that integration, like, yeah, I don't know. If we look at the API, let me pull it up for you. Like, oh yeah, here's the documentation. Yeah. So, oh no, I'm not sure. I'm going to escalate it with person XYZ. Like that's half of the job for customer success teams.
Right. And you know what? Here's another point. If we're talking about, you know, we're all familiar with this whole MBR concept, like monthly business reviews. We're going to do something with our customer. If they're higher touch, you do a monthly business review. You do something along whatever we call it, QBR, MBR, SDR, whatever, XYZ, whatever you want to call it. But that aspect of it can also be automated. You could get something like at least 90% of the way. And then what, I'm going to spend all this time on creating something for what? Like, I want to use my brain cells for something that's going to help them provide more value. Then now, if I were to have something that was created or auto-created by something along those lines, if you make it and fine-tune it to make it right, utilizing the signals, utilizing what's out there in the field, create that portfolio and do things that can bring everything together. You're not just that cloud, you're not just a journey coach, you are also, and this is where I see it too. That's why I say the role's evolving. You're also blending the role with other roles that tend to touch the customers. Like for instance, I'm working with in my company, other companies, right? There's all these different types of roles. There's all these different things that are touching the customer at any given moment. But you could essentially have a success leader in that account already doing what 3 or 4 of those roles are already doing, and then that can help them with their career trajectory. So I'm even saying, yeah, you're removing stuff, but now you can evolve it. So now that, let's say if I have a team, right? I had a team of customer success leaders in my last company, that I was then able to create their plans and career plans to help them get promoted and build their business brand. So they're doing more thought leadership. And now instead of going to a person within the company that's an advisory of industry person that's been involved with one industry for 40, 50, 60, or whatever years, they could just go to the customer success person and say, hey, what are your thoughts on this in the industry? And the customer success person will know that right away, because now they're better enabled and equipped to do that. They're not dealing with the mundane stuff. So that helped build up their career. So now that, you're keeping them enabled. Now there's a whole aspect to this that no one even talks about, which is churn internally, and people get burnt out, and people are saying, no, I can't do this anymore. I want to transfer internally, but some companies are not big enough to do that. They have to go look somewhere else.
Are you saying, like, what's interesting about this? So are you saying we need less but better people in customer success, or we need more because they can actually have the right data using AI to get them equipped to have these conversations, to actually act up as a coach and live a mindful, quote unquote, business life? Like, what are you saying?
I'm saying that there should be, yes, in some cases there should be more, meaning more, but uh, a slight adjustment. And every step of the way, there's another adjustment. You could have a person that's a customer success person, but that's more of a generalist. But now you could also have different groups within a customer success and experience organization that have different specialties in different areas, where you could then have them cross pollinate. And you could have folks within, now I'm getting into organizational development. Then you could have folks understand one aspect of a portfolio. Okay, good. Now what's going to happen is then they get stuck. Okay, now I want to learn something else. I want to figure out something else, because you know how I have my own version of ADHD. So I like to learn, I like to do things, and my mind goes a mile a minute at any given time, and I'm always thinking about things, and I'm always thinking about how to change things and make things better, or even how to do things differently and course correct and reflect on my life. So that's something they could do in an organization. You were to add more, you could add more, but what I'm saying also is that you could collapse and then bring people together, make it one big experience organization. And they're not just no longer focused on one aspect or silo of the business. They're learning something else. They're picking up something from somewhere else within the organization that they're like, oh, wow, you do this? Oh, that's cool. I may not have to reach out. Now I could do that too. So I'd say we need more, but more of the right mix of people. The right mix of people, not just people doing that are comfortable being ticket jockeys, we call them, or doing those kinds of things. They're being a program manager, a portfolio manager, or one of those things. People that know those things, but they also have the aptitude to grow and have more things and add more things to their repertoire, right? More things like, oh, they want to get involved in sales. Why not? Get involved in sales and have a conversation with the customer. Oh, you're doing it already? You just built out an opportunity. Now you know something, you bring it back to the business, you collapse it, make it one bigger organization, and have that right mix of people, which is ultimately what a coach is. A coach is, they weren't necessarily like in baseball, right? I'm going to put this out there. I'm a New York Mets fan. And, I love the team. But
There goes my listening. Like, my bass is now dropped.
oh
Everyone just
no,
tuned
forget
out.
it.
I'm
No, no, no,
sorry.
no. I don't want to lose we don't want to
Kidding.
drop the base there, but it's an example, right? You have a manager, right? And sometimes, I'm impressed with him, sometimes I'm not. And the guy, doesn't these people that are in those types of roles are not always the Hall of Famers. They're not always the people that know everything. They're like the master of all. But they are the people that know how to drive a business and know how to drive their customer. In that case, they're driving their players to be more successful together, right? That's what a customer success leader needs to be. Is they don't need to be they don't need to be a jack of all, master of none, or a master of all, or jack of none, whatever. They need to have that right mix. They need to have just enough so that they can go in and have that viable conversation with the customer, so that the way the customer is not dealing with 40 or 50 people. That's where that focus needs to move towards.
Talk to me about how you have structured your customer experience group. And where I want to go is that we talk a lot about blending of these roles, right? When we take a journey perspective, like, there is way more overlap between pre and post sales, between customer experience, customer success, sales, product. Like there's starting to come a blend, right? So how have you found it useful to structure your customer experience group? Like what are some of the goals or the metrics, the OKRs? Like how do you think about aligning the people while keeping the speciality of each of the roles intact without like too much overlap where everyone's a coach and I'm not sure if I'm in sales or if I'm in CX or if I'm so how have you found to bring that structure to life using like some examples of like structuring your goals, your key results, your OKRs, your metrics, however you want to take that, but what are you doing differently than many organizations? Because in many organizations, CX is just one department. They focus on NPS, CSAT, measuring, surveying. But like, it seems like you've done something completely different.
Yeah, so you want to so not just here, but in general, right? I'm going to talk generalities. Let's talk Ray as a leader and Ray as, the person that if I were to come in, this is what should be done, right? I'm going to put it in that perspective because I think that that's really important. Is you need to have, first of all, and if it's a smaller organization, mid-sized, big organization, that the dynamics are always going to be different. what I what we need to do is, let's say, I'll put it to one example. If I'm coming into a larger organization, OKRs, key results, objectives, key results, all of those things are just outcomes. Those outcomes need to have a clear alignment across every group that is involved, not just in the field, but across all of the leadership that has a play in it, right? Those aspects of it need to be in alignment before that even gets delivered to your groups. Like in my group, for example, like we don't get, those areas are aligned even before it gets to me. Like those areas, like specific areas that we would want to focus on to be successful for a new fiscal year, that needs to be aligned first, number one, right? I can't stress this enough. And if there's no alignment, then there's a no-go, right? It's just gonna be an uphill battle, because now
So
you're
when you say that these are like the broader business goals, like
correct.
for the next year, okay,
The
sure, yes,
business,
okay, got it.
yeah, the business goals, like in these, if we're talking like OKRs, like if I were to come in, the business goals at an overarching level you need to have, review them with each group within the organization at that leadership level first, get that alignment, that stamp and say I'm good. Then the next step is, okay, how do we align? Where do we align? You then have the next layer of the things that get delivered out to people in the field. For example, let's say this is what I would do. Like, this is the areas of the field they focus on. There are all kinds of things like consumption, all the usual suspects, revenue, CSAT, OCSAT, all those things, right? Every organization needs to decide two or three. And if I were to come into a new organization fresh, after all my learnings that I've had and I've seen out there, come up with two or three very, very crucial key objectives, not boiling the ocean, do things simple. I call it the KISS approach. A lot of people call it KISS approach. Keep it simple, stupid. Let everybody reel them in and let them see what those key results are and what that needs to look like, and keep it simple. Two or three, nothing more, nothing less. Start with that. Then you build things out as you progress within the organization. And if I'm going in to expand an organization, let's say, like we were talking about, like I think customer success and experience should, after being blended at the end of the day, have one theme, one team, one theme, as I call it, have everybody working across the plethora of the different portfolios of business, and then enabling them in all the different areas that they're lacking, that whole skills matrix, all those things need to happen. Once that's in place, then you take it a step down and then see, okay, after those two, three main objectives, what are the next key results we need to focus on that at the field level? How are those going to then feed up to the overarching OKRs? How are they then going to feed up to it, right? Because a lot of times there's gaps in that process, right? And even as you get to bigger organizations, there's always going to be something, right? So you want to keep it simple. You want to keep it coordinated, right? And you don't want to boil the ocean with what you're doing when you're setting out there in the field as what those key results are going to be, right? And then there's the aspect of what you're going to have and what you're measuring against with the customer, right? That could be a whole slew of things, right? For me, if I were to go in, I would go in and focus on, number one, value, business value. How's that metrics going to look from a business value? Because I know, you've seen it like CSAT and all those different NRR and CLV, lifetime value, and all those different things we do right out there and measure, right? But a lot of times that doesn't always correlate with the value. And then even though someone is completely satisfied with what you're doing, they're going to come right back to the server and say, oh, I love you. It's okay. That's great. But they're not spending anymore. They're not doing anything. They love it. The 5 out of 5. That's great. So hands off. No, but they're decreasing in their MRR or whatever you want to call it. Why? It could be budget. It could be things like that, right? But we need to. Those are aspects or metrics that we need to figure out, and that's AI. You could figure out how that correlates with the business, how that correlates with the overarching business value, and those metrics that we all know are near and dear to our hearts, CSAT and all the things, that's all part of it. That's one piece of it. But how do we bring that together and blend it into 2 or 3 metrics that you could focus on as a business and not boil the ocean, right? That would be my approach.
Where does the journey come in? Because this is the $1 million question, right? I get like layering on the OKRs and making like this cascading system, if that works for an organization. But like then all of a sudden you get this horizontal nature going from left to right, like aligning with the customer experience. And then teams like, okay, that's hard. That's impossible. Yes, okay, CSAT, we measure it here, and NRR, we measure at the far end. But like, how do you actually break it down on a journey level so that your different segments of the market, your different industries, or maybe even individual customers, like have that like measurable journey where that is actually aligned with your business goals?
Yeah, so there's a few ways to do it. And if I were to talk about like how Ray would do it, I would probably create it, and this could be part of the AI and the tooling aspects and things to help bridge the gap. I would say if you were able to map out a journey across industry, across the regions, across all of those things, the first thing I would do is see how does that all correlate with one another? How are each one of these segments and regions working, right? And then create a workspace, right? And again, I'm putting my technical hat on because this is something I've been thinking about for quite some time is how do we make groups within an organization work better together and show like how that journey looks across different region segments and what are those commonalities, what are those common denominators across each of them, and how do I blend them together, and how do I see what those metrics look and what does that trend look like, and all those things. That there's a lot of tooling that conversations that need to happen. There's a lot of having that single pane of glass, that workspace. To me, my end all be all would be have someone come in. There's a workspace that's real time. You have live signals. You have all these things at your disposal. Whether you're a CSM, a sales guy, post-sales product manager, whatever it is, here's your workspace. This has everything that's going on right now and across visions that they're able to see. It depends on what. If the big organization, a lot of different groups can't have access to certain things. Like I can't have access to certain things. Whatever it is. But if you're, if it's a smaller organization, maybe even easier. But you figure out where those common grounds are. And then create that holistic workspace, create something that gives you a better outlook on what that customer transformation looks like across the different regions and segments as a business leader, to then see, okay, this is what's going on over here in, let's say, EMEA. So EMEA has something, there's a very common issue going on over here. Let me go look on my workspace and see what's going on with the Americas. Do they have something similar? Is there something that I see here that might be different, and what are they doing better? And then use that for my benefit and help like bolster what we're doing, build out things, maybe even course correct the organization a little bit, right? This is what Ray would do. Simple workspace, one thing, single pane of glass. That's, to me, if I were able to get to that Zen environment and make it so that people could say, hey, go to this, make it easy for them to see exactly what the heck is going on, I think that would be a game changer for me.
Right. Oh, that makes two of us. Well, we should talk about that separately. But like that's amazing. And when we think about like, now let me put a different question. I'm gonna give you a magic wand, and you can like remove anything that's like going too slow into this direction today. can be in your org, can be in general, like in the field, like what would you change? Like what would you fundamentally change? And I guess this is going to go into like some aspects of using AI where it's currently not good enough or not working yet. So what would you change? Like the first order of business, like the first wave of your wand, like where would that do?
Oh, the first wave of my wand, outside of, the first wave of my wand would be to get just enough funding to build out all of those things that I just talked about. Number one, right? To see like, hey, I got it all up here. We could do it. I just need X amount of millions of dollars. But, even more than that. But I think that, if I were to wave my wand in all seriousness and say, how can we remove the friction, right? If I'm hearing you correctly, and how can we make that, make that a thing more quickly? The very first thing that I would do is the wand is raised. All of the leaders, everybody that's involved in that organization comes together and has a kumbaya moment. Meaning, everybody is completely aligned with what we need to do and what those goals are. If I were to go in and say, here's a roadmap, this is what we need to do, 3 to 5 years, this is how I'm going to build my organization from a $500 million to $1 billion to $1.5 billion to make them a 7, 8, 9 figure, whatever it is. This is what I want to do. All of those stars are in line, right? Number one, because you could have all of these grandiose ideas and all of those things around, customer journey and all of those things, right? But the aspect of it is, there's a culture shift that needs to happen first and foremost, and that's what I like about CX. CX is also about culture. CX, customer experience, is about culture, fundamental shifts in the culture. How are you aligning with the customer? How are you bringing them along in the journey with you, right? They don't necessarily need to see everything that happens internally, obviously, but how are you bringing them along, and where does that transformation happen? How does it take place? And all the teams internally are magically aligned, and things happen in that sense, right? Getting folks to, my part of my magic wand would be, I would love, for me, my opinion is have all of those top leaders coalesce and combine and have one big organization. Done. That's my magic wand. Why? Because then you don't have to deal with the silos anymore. Then you don't have to deal with all those things, right? That's why, I enjoyed working with smaller mid-market firms and things of that nature, right? I worked as a system integrator. I was local here in near where I live, outside of Philly in Bluebell, and we did things, and there's a lot of things you could do. You could fail fast, which I like doing, learning from your mistakes, doing things very quickly, and course correction, and doing things called guerrilla testing, the different things that we're trying to do to an organization. We're able to do that a little bit more easily, right? More agile, right? My magic wand would be making every organization, not just small and medium ones, make big organizations agile, right? They call it, we call it back in one of my prior roles, experience-based acceleration, right? Can I make an organization, based on our experience, accelerate what they're doing and talk to each other? Have that open line of communications and make them feel comfortable with talking to me about anything and everything, right? Well, who cares? We're on the same team. Why do you have to have different groups? Like, just get over it. You know what I mean?
Right. Yeah, I know exactly what you mean. And I mean, like, one thing is wishing for it with the magic wand, but it seems like you are on track, because that kumbaya moment might not be even that far away. I'm seeing organizations achieve it, bringing like a journey-centric operating model together.
Yeah.
I'm literally seeing organizations create that kumbaya moment, sometimes even in their offices, like literally bringing people, leadership together around this end-to-end journey that is based on all these different teams. But that's definitely like a first step in the right direction. So, Ray, wishing you a kumbaya moment. If people want to have theirs and they're in customer success, they're in customer experience, and they think like, oh, okay, it all makes a lot of sense what you're saying, but I need to start somewhere. Being a journey coach, like, where can they find you if they need to reach out to you and they want to learn more?
Oh yeah, I mean, I'm readily available. I even have my own. I do a podcast as well on the side, which is through the Customer Success Collective, by the way, and we should partner on that, by the way. Which is, and bring you on, which is, the customer success and customer experience happy hour, because it's a very informal thing. It's me with a co-host very formidable and amazing leader, Kimberly Ayala. We work very closely on that, that model, that motion for. We talk about anything and everything. We literally just talk about each other's ailments, bring something to the table, and just bring goodness back to the field. Plus, we also give collateral. We give like content and maybe samples, templates, things to think about, and get one thing they'll leave from a podcast. Say, here's a deliverable. Here's something that you could take away from. And if you're a small organization, you want to get started. Here's something you could use. Maybe it's helpful. Maybe it's not. But it's something. We always do something like that. So I would say you can see me on that in the Customer Success Collective. I'm on LinkedIn like crazy. I share things. I do a lot of article postings. I work, across all different types of customers, right? Reach out to me there. I'll easily, help or assist where I can.
I love it. We're going to put links to all of these 3 things in the show notes so people can find it. And maybe you will hear me on the CS Happy Hour at some point.
Oh, you will.
When we swap seats. So let's talk about that.
Oh, yeah.
Thank you so much for sharing today, Ray. You were fantastic.
Thank you. Thank you, Joachim. Thanks for the opportunity. And I got to say one more thing, though, and say that if you're thinking about, being a coach, again, it's, the one thing I would say is any leader, in my opinion, I don't know if people won't like me for this, but leave your egos at the door. Be humble, right? Have a sense of humility with what we're doing and just work together with one another. And I think that's half the battle. There's always something that for me that someone else knows more than me. And I like that, and I like to be around people like that. Like Joachim, definitely a lot more than me in a lot of different areas, and we could share notes, but it's all about nurturing, and it's not just about nurturing customers; it's about nurturing one another inside of the business. And I think that that's part of that culture shift that is fundamental and needs to happen. So, no egos. Just be yourself and be one with that. And then you'll be able to accomplish things more quickly.
This resonates with my listeners for sure. I know there's no egos. Pay it forward. Share this with someone who needs to hear it. No egos. Thank you, Ray, for joining me today.
Of course. Thanks, Joachim. Appreciate you.
All right, and that's it. Thank you so much for listening. If you found it valuable today, don't forget to subscribe to the Experience Edge on your favorite podcast channel, leave a review, and share it with your team. I'd be delighted. Today's episode was brought to you by Daydo, an AI journey management solution for enterprise. To have an edge on your business strategy and to know why your customers do what they do, visit daydo.com and explore more resources to accelerate your customer experience game. And remember, the journey to creating customer-centric impact never ends. And there's always a new edge to discover in doing things differently. Next week, new episode. Until then, pushing the edge, stay inspired. See you in the next episode.